$3 billion. That's what Kang Junseo was worth when he woke up this morning. By tonight, he'd be worth nothing. And the worst part? He was about to do it to himself. His pen hovered over page 73, the final signature on a document that would erase 3 generations of empire. His most trusted advisor sat 3 seats away, smiling. Junseo didn't know he was signing his own death warrant, but someone in that room did. She was supposed to be invisible. A waitress. A nobody. A woman who had no business reading billionaire contracts or understanding the trap hidden in Clause 7, subsection B. But Destiny Okafor had a degree in forensic accounting and a grandmother who taught her that staying silent was the same as holding the knife. The pen touched paper. She opened her mouth, and 2 words changed everything. What she spotted in those documents, it will make your blood run cold. Hi, viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Now let me take you inside that room. Rain slashed against the windows of Seoul's most exclusive restaurant, like the sky itself was trying to break in. The private dining room at the Sovereign smelled like old money and fresh betrayal. Chrysanthemum arrangements worth more than most monthly salaries sat on tables draped in silk. The walls were paneled in wood salvaged from a Joseon-era temple. Illegal to own, impossible to buy. Yet here it was, absorbing the whispered deals of men who believed laws were written for other people. Crystal decanters caught the candlelight and fractured it into rainbows that danced across documents no court would ever see. Junseo sat at the head of the table. And he was drowning. Not visibly. Never visibly. He'd learned at 7 years old, watching his father negotiate with men who would later try to kill him, that showing weakness was an invitation to violence. So his posture remained perfect. His expression remained stone. His hand remained steady as it held a Mont Blanc pen worth more than some cars. But inside, everything was collapsing. The document in front of him was 73 pages of legal destruction, asset liquidation and debt restructuring agreement, clean words for a dirty truth, the Kang Syndicate, 3 generations of empire, 40 years of dominance, his father's legacy, his grandfather's dream, about to be sold for parts. And Junseo was holding the knife. The men around the table watched him with varying degrees of hunger. To his right sat the investors. 3 representatives from Daejin Capital, a private equity firm that existed to acquire distressed assets from people too desperate to negotiate. Their lead negotiator, a woman named Cha Yeon-ji, had a smile like a paper cut. Thin, precise, surprisingly painful. To his left sat director Hwan Sung-min. Silver hair swept back from a face that had perfected the expression of loyal concern. 54 years old. 22 years of service. He'd been with the syndicate longer than Junseo had been an adult. He'd attended Junseo's graduation from Harvard. He'd stood beside him at his father's funeral. He'd wept, actually wept, when the old man's casket lowered into the ground. Now he sat 3 seats away, watching his boss prepare to sign away everything, and something in his expression didn't match his words. Junseo noticed it, a flicker. Quick, almost hidden. The corner of Sungmin's mouth twitched upward for just a fraction of a second. Not concern, anticipation. Why would a loyal man look eager at his boss's destruction? Junseo pushed the thought away. He was exhausted, paranoid. 6 months of crisis after crisis had worn his judgment thin. Sungmin had been loyal for 22 years. He'd earned the benefit of the doubt. Hadn't he? The terms are quite generous, considering the circumstances. Yeon-ji's voice cut through his thoughts. Pleasant, professional, utterly without mercy. Full debt forgiveness in exchange for controlling interest in Kang Holdings. You'll retain a ceremonial position, of course, a title, an office. Her smile sharpened. We're not monsters, Mr. Kang. We understand the value of legacy. Legacy. The word was a knife. And the shipping routes? Junseo heard himself ask. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. will be managed by our operational team, more efficiently, we expect. Less exposure to regulatory scrutiny. Less exposure, meaning we'll run your empire without the inconvenience of your presence. The Busan terminal? Included in the asset transfer, paragraph 47, subsection C. Yeonji's smile didn't waver. It's all very clearly documented, Mr. Kang. Director Hwan has been meticulous in his preparations. Jun Seo looked at Sung Min. The older man had the grace to look uncomfortable, briefly. Then his expression smoothed into something that might have been pity. It's the only way forward, Jun Seo, ya. The familiar address, the suffix he'd used since Jun Seo was a child. It felt wrong now. Dirty. Your father would have understood. Sometimes, to survive, we must adapt. My father would have cut your throat and fed you to the harbor fish. But Jun Seo didn't say that. He couldn't say that. Because for all his father's ruthlessness, for all the violence that had built and maintained the Kang Empire, Jun Seo had inherited one fatal flaw. He believed in loyalty. He believed that 22 years of service meant something. He believed that men who wept at funerals meant their tears. He believed. And now he would pay for that belief with everything. The pen felt heavier than it should. 73 pages, 47 signature lines, each one a small death, a piece of his inheritance signed away to people who had never earned it. His hand trembled. No one noticed. Sign it. End this. At least you'll survive. At least you'll have something. A title, an office, a life, even if it's a diminished one. Or don't sign, refuse, and watch them take everything anyway, through courts and creditors, and the legal mechanisms that left him no other choice. The tip of the pen touched paper. He began to write the first stroke of his name, and then, "Excuse me." A voice, female, accented Korean, foreign but fluent. Coming from the doorway where a waitress stood holding a tray of tea that no one had ordered. Every head turned. Jun Seo looked up, and something in the air shifted. She was tall, dark skin, American by the accent, standing in the doorway like she belonged there, even though everything about her presence said she didn't. 2 words, that's all she said. But those 2 words stopped a $3 billion signature, and nothing would ever be the same. What happened next? It will destroy everything you think you know about loyalty. He was 1 signature away from losing everything. Most people would never see the trap until it was too late. Subscribe now, because this betrayal runs deeper than anyone imagined. Jun Seo's pen froze mid-stroke. The waitress stood in the doorway, her dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that didn't match her uniform. She held a silver tray with a porcelain teapot and cups that no one had requested. "We didn't order tea," Yeonji said flatly. The manager insisted. The woman was already moving, walking toward the table, toward the documents, toward the moment that would change everything. "Special blend, very rare." Something about her voice made Jun Seo's spine straighten, confidence wrapped in calm. Like she was reading a script only she could see. But that didn't make sense. She was just a waitress, wasn't she? 6 months ago, none of this would have been possible. 6 months ago, the Kang Syndicate had been untouchable. They controlled the ports. Not officially. Officially, the ports belonged to the government, operated by licensed companies with boards of directors and shareholder meetings. But everyone who mattered knew the truth. Every container that moved through Busan, Incheon, or Pyeongtaek moved with Kang permission. Every customs official who looked the other way did so because Kang money had purchased their blindness. Every shipping route that carried goods across the Yellow Sea ran through channels the Kang family had carved 3 decades ago. Jun Seo's grandfather had started with a single fishing boat and a willingness to transport things that fishing boats weren't supposed to transport. His father had transformed that single boat into a fleet. That fleet into a network. That network into an empire so deeply embedded in Korea's economic infrastructure that destroying it would have meant destroying the economy itself. And Jun Seo, 36 years old, Harvard MBA, the prince groomed since birth to inherit the throne. He had taken that empire, and in 6 months, watched it crumble. Not through incompetence, through trust. The first crack appeared 6 months ago, a regulatory investigation. Unexpected, aggressive. Sungmin had come to him with concern etched across his face. "I've found investors," he'd said. "Quiet money. They'll provide the bridge financing we need. You just have to sign a few documents." Jun Seo had signed. The second crack came 4 months ago. "The investigation is worse than we thought," Sungmin had reported. "But I've negotiated a settlement. It requires restructuring some assets. You just have to sign a few documents." Jun Seo had signed. The third crack came 2 months ago. "The Chinese partners are pulling out, but I've found replacements. They need guarantees, personal guarantees. You just have to sign." Jun Seo had signed. Every document, every signature, every trusting nod across a conference table. Bricks in his own tomb. The bridge financing had come with interest rates that would make loan sharks blush, hidden in subclauses written in legal Korean so dense it required 3 readings to understand. The restructuring had transferred key assets into shell companies. Companies that Sungmin controlled. The personal guarantees had made Jun Seo liable for debts that had been manufactured specifically to be unpayable. And here was the truth Jun Seo would never admit. Not to the board, not to investigators, barely to himself. He'd seen the warning signs, small inconsistencies, numbers that didn't quite add up, questions he chose not to ask, because asking felt like betraying the man who'd stood beside his father's coffin. He wasn't just betrayed, he'd betrayed himself first. His own instincts had screamed warnings for months, and he'd silenced them, buried them under 22 years of trust, dismissed them as paranoia born from grief. His father had been dead for 18 months. Maybe Jun Seo just needed someone to believe in, someone to lean on, someone who remembered the old days. Sungmin had been that person, and Sungmin had used that need like a weapon. Now, 73 pages later, Jun Seo understood what he'd been signing all along, his own execution. The waitress set her tray down, directly on top of the contract. "Oh," she gasped, her eyes going wide. "I'm so sorry. Let me just—" Her hands scattered papers as she pretended to clean up a spill that didn't exist. Pages 20 through 30 slid across the table. Page 23 ended up face up directly in front of Jun Seo, and something caught his eye. A number. Buried in Clause 7. Subsection B, 4.7%. That was the interest rate Sungmin had promised. Competitive, reasonable. The kind of rate you'd expect from legitimate bridge financing, but the calculation beneath it told a different story. Jun Seo's blood went cold. "Clumsy girl," Sungmin hissed. "Someone remove this woman immediately." "Wait." Jun Seo's voice cut through the chaos. He was staring at page 23. At the numbers that didn't match the words. His finger traced the calculation. Monthly compounding, not annual. 4.7% monthly worked out to an effective annual rate of over 70%. That wasn't bridge financing. That was financial execution. "This interest rate," Jun Seo said slowly. "It says 4.7%. Correct." Yeonji's smile tightened. "Very competitive, given your risk profile." "But this calculation..." His finger kept moving, following the math, finding more discrepancies. "This isn't 4.7% annually. This is 4.7% monthly. Compounded." Silence crashed through the room like a wave. "A typo," Sungmin said quickly. "A clerical error. Easily corrected." "Is it?" Jun Seo flipped to page 31, then 42, then 58. The same discrepancy appeared in every projection, every repayment schedule, every calculation. Not clerical errors. A pattern. This isn't a restructuring agreement. Junseo's voice was changing now. Stronger. The drowning man finding solid ground beneath his feet. This is a loan shark contract with a Harvard law degree. Mr. Kang, you're misreading the documents. Am I? He grabbed another page. Page 47. The asset transfer clause. These assets I'm supposedly transferring as non-performing. They're already listed as collateral for the original bridge loan, which means I'm transferring assets I've already pledged. Which means the original loan is immediately callable. The voice came from the waitress. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the scattered documents, her expression calm but focused, like a surgeon examining an X-ray. All of it, she continued, at once. If he signs this agreement, he triggers a default on the original financing. The bridge loan becomes immediately due in full. He can't pay it. No one could at those rates. So Daejin Capital forecloses on everything. Not just what's in this agreement. She paused. Everything. The room went silent. And the best part? Her eyes moved to Sungmin. He keeps his fee either way, don't you, Director? Sungmin's face had gone pale. This is absurd. This woman is a waitress. She has no idea. Page 67. Her voice didn't waver. Consultant fee structure. Director Hwan Sung-min receives 12% of all recovered assets as payment for advisory services. She did the math in her head. At current valuations, that's approximately 800 million won. 800 million won. Roughly $700,000. The price of 22 years of loyalty. The room erupted, but the waitress wasn't finished. Because what she'd found in those documents? That was only the beginning. The bankruptcy wasn't about money. It was about revenge. And the man who orchestrated it had been waiting 20 years for this moment. 22 years of loyalty. And it was all a lie. But the real question isn't who betrayed him. It's why. What would make a man destroy the person who trusted him most? If you think you know the answer, you're wrong. Keep watching. Destiny Okafor hadn't planned to speak. She'd planned to pour tea, bow politely, and disappear back into the kitchen where no one would remember her face. That was the job. That was the survival strategy she'd perfected over 14 months in Seoul. See nothing. Say nothing. Survive until you can leave. But then she'd seen page 23, and her mouth had opened before her brain could stop it. Now every eye in the room was locked on her. A black American woman in a server's uniform, standing in the middle of a Mafia boardroom, explaining complex financial fraud to men who could make her disappear with a phone call. What was she thinking? The truth was, she wasn't. She was reacting. Years of training taking over. Howard University, forensic accounting, magna cum laude. Her senior thesis on manufactured insolvency. The FBI recruiter who'd called her work exactly what we need. All of it flooding back in a single moment of recognition. Page 23, Clause 7, subsection B. She'd written about this exact trap, this exact structure, this exact method of weaponizing debt to execute hostile takeovers. And now she was watching it happen in real time. Destiny had come to Seoul 14 months ago with a simple plan. Work for a year, maybe 2. Save every penny. Pay off the student loans that hung around her neck like chains. Then go home. Apply to the FBI. Start the career she'd dreamed about since childhood. Her father had been a cop in Baltimore. 32 years on the force. He'd taught her that justice wasn't something you waited for. It was something you built with your own hands. Her grandmother had been a domestic worker in Georgia. She'd taught Destiny something different, something harder. The world is dark because too many people decide it's someone else's job to turn on the lights. Destiny had carried those words across an ocean, but Seoul didn't care about her credentials. In Seoul, she was a Black American woman with a degree no one recognized, overqualified for everything, underemployed for survival. The sovereign paid well. The hours were brutal. The things she witnessed, deals, documents, casual corruption, would have made excellent case studies for the career she couldn't yet afford to pursue. So she developed a rule: see nothing, say nothing, survive. Simple, safe, smart. And tonight she'd broken it, because the man at the head of that table was about to sign his own destruction. And she couldn't watch someone drown when she knew how to throw a rope. But that wasn't the whole truth. Because underneath the noble story her grandmother would approve of, there was another truth. Smaller, uglier, human. Destiny was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of serving rich people who looked through her like glass. Tired of a degree that meant nothing in this country. Tired of counting pennies while billionaires signed documents that could fund her dreams 1,000 times over. Maybe saving this man was also about saving herself. Maybe she saw this moment as her ticket out, a chance to finally use her degree, to finally matter. Did that make her selfish? She didn't know. Did it matter? The pen was touching paper. The signature was starting. And in 3 seconds, it would all be over. 3 seconds. That's all she had. Her hand tightened on the serving tray. In 3 seconds, the pen would finish its stroke. The signature would be complete. And a man she'd never met would lose everything to people who had been planning his destruction for 6 months. She could stay silent, stay invisible, stay employed. Or she could open her mouth and burn her entire life down. But here's what Destiny didn't know yet. What even Jun Seo didn't know. What no one in that room understood. The bankruptcy wasn't about money. It was about revenge. And the man who orchestrated it? He'd been waiting 20 years for this moment. Destiny was about to step into a war she didn't know existed. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. The world is dark because too many people decide it's someone else's job to turn on the lights. She took a breath, stepped forward, and spoke 2 words that would make her a target. Excuse me. The room froze. Now, standing in the middle of that frozen moment, Destiny felt the weight of every eye. Director Juan's face had cycled through surprise, irritation, and now something she recognized from years of studying criminals. Fear. He was afraid of her. Not of what she'd said, of what she might know, of what she might say next. The calculation was instant. If she knew about page 23, what else had she seen? How much did she understand? How dangerous was she? This woman is a waitress, Sungmin repeated, but his voice had lost its authority. She has no business. Page 67, Destiny said again. Consultant fee structure, 12% of recovered assets, 800 million won. She let the number hang in the air. That's how much you're being paid to destroy him. Sungmin's face went white, but not because she'd exposed him, because she'd exposed herself. A waitress who could calculate compound interest in her head. Who could identify manufactured insolvency structures at a glance? Who knew exactly which page to cite and exactly which clause to reference? She wasn't invisible anymore. And in this world, visibility was dangerous. Who are you? Sungmin whispered. Destiny met his eyes. Nobody important. But they both knew that wasn't true anymore. What happened next would destroy a man who thought he was untouchable. And create enemies who would never forget her face. Have you ever seen something wrong? Really wrong? And had to decide whether to speak up? That moment when your heart pounds and your brain screams, stay quiet? Destiny had 3 seconds to make a choice that would change 2 lives forever. What would you have done? The room exploded into chaos. Director Bay shot to his feet, his chair scraping against marble. What is the meaning of this? Director Kwan slammed his palm on the table. "Explain yourself, Sung-min." The lawyers from Daejin Capital were frantically reshuffling papers, their composed professionalism cracking like thin ice. Cha Yun-ji had her phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly in hushed tones. "And Director Hwan Sung-min?" He was backing toward the door. 22 years of loyal service. 22 years of "trust me, Junseo-ya." 22 years of careful positioning and patient manipulation. All of it unraveling because a waitress knew how to read a contract. "Junseo-ya, you have to understand. Don't!" Junseo's voice cut through the chaos like a blade forged in ice. He stood. The movement was sudden enough to make the lawyers flinch. 6 feet of controlled fury rising from the head of the table. "Don't call me that. Don't ever call me that again." The familiar suffix, the "ya" that Sung-min had used since Junseo was a child, hung in the air between them like a curse. "This is a misunderstanding," Sung-min tried. His voice had lost its smooth confidence. Now it was pitched higher, faster, desperate. The interest rate calculations were a clerical error. The asset transfers were for tax optimization. Everything I did was for the good of the syndicate. The good of the syndicate? Junseo moved around the table, each step deliberate, predatory. "You transferred 40% of our port operations into shell companies you control. You structured loans designed to be unpayable. You positioned Daejin Capital to foreclose on everything the moment I signed." He stopped 3 feet from Sung-min. "And you would have collected 800 million won for your trouble." Sung-min's back hit the wall. "Your father would have understood," he whispered. "The old ways, the old arrangements. You're trying to change everything. Legitimize operations that have worked for 40 years. Do you know how many people depend on those operations staying exactly as they are? People like you? People with power. People who can make problems disappear or create problems that destroy everything." Sung-min's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, finding none. "I was protecting you, protecting the syndicate from your naive—" "Protecting me?" Junseo laughed. The sound was hollow, terrible. "You were burying me. Brick by brick, document by document. And you would have stood at my funeral and wept just like you wept at my father's." The words landed like physical blows. Sung-min's face twisted. The mask of loyal advisor finally crumbling to reveal something uglier beneath. "Your father was a great man. He understood how this world works. He understood that power requires certain arrangements, certain compromises, certain partnerships with people who don't appear in shareholder meetings." His voice turned bitter. "You were supposed to continue his work. Instead, you started dismantling everything, cutting ties with the organizations that kept us powerful, trying to turn the Kang Syndicate into just another shipping company. A legitimate shipping company. Legitimate." Sung-min spat the word. "Legitimate means weak. Legitimate means vulnerable. Legitimate means your enemies smell blood in the water." "So you decided to become one of those enemies?" "I decided to survive. The people I work with now, they don't care about your MBA or your 5-year legitimization plan. They care about the ports. They care about the routes. They care about the infrastructure your grandfather built and your father maintained." Sung-min straightened slightly. "They were going to take it anyway. All I did was position myself to benefit from the inevitable." Junseo stared at the man who had been his father's right hand, who had bounced him on his knee as a child, who had taught him to tie a tie before his first day at prep school. "Who?" Junseo's voice was quiet now, deadly. "Who do you work for?" Sung-min's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You'll find out. Soon enough." He glanced toward the waitress, the American woman who had unraveled 6 months of careful planning with 2 words and a scattered tea tray. "You should have stayed invisible," he said to her. "The people I work for don't forget faces. And they don't forgive interference." Destiny felt ice slide down her spine, but she didn't look away. "I'll take my chances." Junseo turned to his security team, 2 men who had been standing silently by the wall throughout the meeting, waiting for orders that had never come. Director Juan doesn't leave this building. Contact Chief Inspector Yoon. Tell him I have evidence of financial fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit corporate theft. Junseo paused. Tell him to bring handcuffs. You can't do this. Sungmin's voice rose. I have protection. I have connections. Your father? My father is dead. Junseo stepped closer, close enough that Sungmin could see the rage barely contained behind his eyes. Whatever protection you thought you had died with him. You've been operating on borrowed time, Director. The debt just came due. Security moved forward. Sungmin screamed threats, promises, pleas. The desperate soundtrack of a man watching his betrayal fail. He invoked names, powerful names, names that made the board members shift uncomfortably. But Junseo didn't flinch, and security didn't stop. The Daijin representatives had already vanished, slipped out a side door the moment the tide turned, abandoning their architect to his fate. The lawyers followed, briefcases clutched like shields, designer shoes clicking rapid retreat across the marble floor. Director Bei, Director Kwan, Director Lim. The board members who had sat in silence while Junseo nearly signed away his legacy, they remained frozen, uncertain, afraid to move in any direction until they knew which way the wind would blow. Within 3 minutes, the private dining room was nearly empty. Just Junseo, the scattered documents, the overturned tea tray, and the waitress. Sungmin was being dragged toward the door by security when he turned back one final time. His eyes locked onto Destiny. His lips moved. She couldn't hear the words over the chaos, but she could read them. You have no idea what you've done. The door closed behind him. Silence flooded the room like water filling a sinking ship. Junseo stood motionless for a long moment, his back to her, his shoulders rising and falling with controlled breaths. Then he turned. And Destiny felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. This close, she could see the exhaustion beneath his composure, the sleepless nights, the mounting pressure, the slow suffocation of watching everything slip away. She could also see the intelligence, sharp and reassessing, recalculating her presence in this room. His eyes traveled over her. The server's uniform, the scattered tea service, the complete absence of anything that explained what had just happened. When he spoke, the question wasn't thank you. It was something far more dangerous. Who sent you? The words hung in the air between them, and Destiny realized that surviving this room might be harder than speaking up in the first place. 800 million won. That's how much his trusted advisor was being paid to destroy him. But here's the thing, that's not even the biggest secret in that room. The real betrayal goes so much deeper. And if you're not subscribed, you'll miss the moment everything falls apart. Destiny held Junseo's stare without blinking. No one sent me. Impossible. He moved closer, each step deliberate, calculated. The walk of a man who had learned to read lies before he learned to read books. Forensic accountant, corporate spy, which of my competitors sent you? None of them. Then explain. His voice dropped lower. Explain how a waitress identifies compound interest fraud at a glance. Explain how a server calculates complex default triggers in her head. Explain why someone with zero stake in this company would destroy her own career to save a stranger. I'm exactly what I look like. Destiny kept her voice steady. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. A waitress who read the wrong page at the wrong time, or the right page at the right time, depending on your perspective. Junseo's eyes narrowed. Nobody has that kind of knowledge by accident. I have a degree in forensic accounting from Howard University, magna cum laude. She shrugged, fighting to keep the motion casual. Student loans are expensive. Seoul was supposed to be temporary. 14 months and counting. Forensic accounting. Specialized in financial fraud detection. I wrote my senior thesis on manufactured insolvency schemes. The exact kind of trap that was waiting in those documents. She nodded toward the scattered papers. When I saw page 23, I recognized the structure, the language, the way the numbers were arranged to lie. Jun Seo was silent for a long moment. The candles flickered. The rain continued its assault on the windows. Somewhere in the building, Sung-min was being processed by security. The Kang Syndicate was teetering on the edge of either salvation or destruction. And Destiny stood in the middle of it all, waiting to see which way she would fall. You could have stayed silent. Jun Seo's voice had changed, softer now, almost wondering. You could have let me sign. No one would have blamed you. No one would have known. I would have known. And that matters to you? The knowing? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. My grandmother used to say the world is dark because too many people decide it's someone else's job to turn on the lights. Destiny met his gaze. I saw the darkness. I had a flashlight. Seemed stupid not to use it. Something shifted in Jun Seo's expression. The sharp assessment softened into something almost like wonder. You just made a very powerful enemy. His voice was gentle now, warning her, not threatening. Director Hwan has friends, allies, people who benefited from his arrangement with Dae-jin. They'll want to know who disrupted their plans. I figured. You're not afraid? I'm terrified. Destiny smiled slightly. The confession felt like releasing a held breath. But I've been terrified before. Turns out I'd do some of my best work scared. Jun Seo laughed. The sound surprised them both. Genuine, unexpected, breaking through the weight of the evening like sunlight through storm clouds. Destiny Okafor. He tested the name, let it roll across his tongue. Forensic accountant, waitress. Flashlight operator. He extended his hand. I think you just changed my life. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, surprisingly human for a man who commanded empires and survived betrayals. I think the night is young. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped. Two strangers bound together by circumstance and courage, and the kind of split-second decision that changes everything. Then Jun Seo released her hand and stepped back. I need to understand everything. Every document, every clause, every trap Sung-min buried in 3 years of administration. He gestured toward the scattered papers. I have forensic accountants on retainer, corporate lawyers, financial analysts, but they're all people Sung-min helped me hire. The implication hung in the air. Any of them could be compromised. You need someone you can trust, Destiny said. I don't trust easily. Not anymore. Jun Seo's jaw tightened. I trusted Sung-min for 22 years, and he tried to steal my family's legacy. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm offering to help. Why? Because I spent 4 years studying exactly this kind of fraud. Because I'm good at finding things people try to hide. And because... She paused. Because my grandmother didn't raise me to see someone drowning and walk away. Jun Seo studied her for a long moment. The rain hammered against the windows. The candles cast dancing shadows across his face. The documents lay scattered around them like fallen soldiers. Come work for me. Destiny blinked. What? I don't trust easily. I trusted Director Hwan for 22 years. But you... He paused. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose. You spoke up anyway. That kind of courage. I need that in my organization. I'm not Korean. The objection came automatically. I'm not from this world. Your board will never accept... My board just watched me almost sign away our future because they didn't speak up. Jun Seo's voice hardened. Their opinions on staffing are no longer relevant? Destiny stared at him. This was insane. 3 hours ago, she'd been refilling water glasses and counting the minutes until her shift ended. Now a billionaire Mafia boss was offering her a job. What position? Chief Forensic Analyst, Special Projects Division. He named a salary that made her knees weak. Your job would be to find every trap Sungmin left behind, every hidden clause, every manufactured liability, every bomb buried in 3 years of administration. Destiny thought about her student loans, her cramped apartment, her stalled FBI application, her dreams gathering dust while she served tea to men who could buy and sell her future without noticing. This was insane. But so was speaking up in the first place. When do I start? Monday. Junseo's eyes held hers. Unless you'd prefer to start tonight. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression shifted, darkened. Chief Inspector Yoon is here for Sungmin. He looked back at her. This will take several hours. Go home. Rest. Process what happened tonight. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. The kind of card that cost more to print than most people earned in a day. My private number. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. Destiny took the card. The paper felt like a contract, like a door opening to a room she couldn't see into. Thank you, she said, for believing me. Junseo's expression softened for just a moment. Thank you for being worth believing. He turned and walked toward the door, toward the chaos waiting outside, toward the wreckage of his empire and the long work of rebuilding. At the threshold, he paused. Destiny. She looked up. What you did tonight took more courage than anything I've seen in 10 years of running this organization. His voice carried weight, sincerity. I won't forget it. He disappeared through the door. Destiny stood alone in the ruined private dining room, surrounded by scattered contracts and overturned teacups, and the fading scent of chrysanthemums worth more than her monthly salary. She looked down at the business card in her hand. Kang Junseo, CEO, Kang Holdings. Underneath, in smaller print, private. She'd just changed her entire life with 2 words. And somewhere in the building, a man who had promised to make her regret it was being led away in handcuffs. But as Destiny walked out into the rain-soaked Seoul night, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Sungmin had mentioned people with power, people who wanted the Kang ports, people who didn't appear in shareholder meetings. Someone had orchestrated this entire scheme, and that someone was still out there, watching, waiting, planning their next move. Destiny pulled her jacket tighter against the rain. Monday couldn't come fast enough. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the real enemy had already learned her name. And he was very, very interested in the waitress who had destroyed 6 months of careful planning. We've all seen betrayal, but this was surgical, planned for years, executed with precision. And the only person who saw it coming? A waitress with nothing to gain and everything to lose. If that doesn't restore your faith in humanity, keep watching. Because Destiny's story is just beginning. Who are you, really? Junseo's voice echoed through the empty dining room 3 weeks after the night that changed everything. He stood at the window of his corner office, 62 floors above Seoul, watching Destiny's reflection in the glass. She sat behind a desk that cost more than her entire Howard University education. Chief Forensic Analyst, Special Projects Division. The nameplate gleamed under recessed lighting. The salary had already cleared her first student loan payment, but his question wasn't about her credentials. It was about trust. I'm exactly who I told you I was. Destiny didn't look up from the financial statements spread across her desk. Red flags marked 17 different documents. 17 bombs Sungmin had buried in 3 years of careful administration. A waitress with a useful degree and terrible timing. Or perfect timing. Depends on your perspective. Jun Seo turned from the window. His tailored suit probably cost more than her apartment's annual rent. His eyes held exhaustion that no amount of money could fix. My perspective keeps shifting. 3 weeks of working together. 3 weeks of late nights reviewing documents. 3 weeks of coffee runs and shared meals and conversations that stretched past midnight. 3 weeks of watching him rebuild an empire while she dismantled the traps designed to destroy it. And somewhere along the way, something had changed. The way he looked at her now wasn't professional. It wasn't suspicious either. It was something else entirely. I found another shell company, Destiny said, redirecting the conversation to safer ground. Registered in the Cayman Islands, Sungmin transferred approximately $40 million through it over the past 18 months. Jun Seo crossed the room, stood behind her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. Show me. She pulled up the documentation, walked him through the paper trail, explained how the money had moved through 7 different jurisdictions before landing in an account that technically didn't exist. He leaned closer, his hand rested on the back of her chair, not touching her, but close. How did you find this? The timestamps didn't match. Sungmin backdated the transfer records, but he forgot to backdate the currency exchange confirmations. The $1 to dollar conversion rates correspond to March of this year, not March of last year when the transfers supposedly occurred. Jun Seo was silent for a moment. You found a $40 million fraud because of currency exchange rates. I found a $40 million fraud because someone got lazy. Destiny finally looked up, met his eyes. People who steal usually get caught because of small mistakes. The big lies are actually easier to hide than the little details. Something flickered in his expression. Is that what you think I am? A big lie? The question caught her off guard. What? A criminal. A mafia boss. A man built on dirty money and dangerous secrets. He didn't look away. Is that the big lie you see when you look at me? Destiny's mouth went dry. The truth was complicated. Jun Seo's family had built their empire on smuggling and bribery and arrangements that would never survive daylight. His grandfather had been a criminal. His father had been a criminal. By any objective measure, Jun Seo himself was complicit in decades of illegal activity, but that wasn't what she saw when she looked at him. She saw a man trying to change, a man who had inherited a kingdom of shadows and was slowly, painfully dragging it toward the light. A man who could have continued the old ways, the profitable ways, the easy ways, and instead chose to risk everything for legitimacy. I see someone who's trying to be better than where he came from, she said quietly. That's not a small thing. Jun Seo's expression shifted, softened. No, he agreed. It's not. The moment stretched between them. Heavy with possibility. Electric with everything neither of them was saying. Destiny's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A message. Dinner tonight? I want to discuss the Busan files. She looked up at Jun Seo. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. Business dinner? She asked. Or actual dinner? His mouth curved slightly. Does it have to be one or the other? She typed her reply without looking at the keys. Pick me up at 7, and this time I'm ordering for myself. Her finger hovered over send. This was crossing a line, a professional boundary that existed for good reasons. He was her boss, her protector. The man who had pulled her from invisibility into a world of power and danger and possibilities she'd never imagined. Getting involved with him was stupid. Getting involved with him was reckless. Getting involved with him was probably the most dangerous decision she could make. She hit send. Jun Seo's phone buzzed. He read the message, smiled. 7 o'clock. Wear something that isn't business casual. He walked toward the door, paused at the threshold. Destiny. She looked up. Thank you for everything you found. Everything you've done. Everything you've risked. His voice was softer now, genuine. I don't say that enough. You don't have to say it at all. But I want to. He held her gaze. I want you to know that I see you. Not just what you do for this company, but who you are. He disappeared down the hallway. Destiny stared at the empty doorway. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. And her phone was buzzing again. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Different message. Different everything. You should have stayed invisible. The words turned her blood to ice. She recognized them. Sungmin had said the same thing the night security dragged him away. The same warning. The same threat. But Sungmin was in custody, awaiting trial, unable to contact anyone outside his legal team, which meant someone else had sent this message. Someone who knew her number. Someone who was watching. Destiny's hands stopped shaking. Her fear crystallized into something harder, more dangerous. She'd spent her whole life being underestimated, being overlooked, being dismissed. If these people thought she would run, they didn't know her at all. She typed a reply. I don't do invisible anymore. Come find me if you dare. She hit send. And somewhere in Seoul, a phone buzzed in the hands of a man who had been waiting 20 years for revenge. He smiled. The waitress had just made this personal. She risked everything for a stranger. Now that stranger is offering her more than a job, but there's a target on her back, and she doesn't even know who's holding the gun. If you're not subscribed, you might miss the moment her world explodes. Don't say I didn't warn you. The black sedan appeared on Tuesday. Destiny spotted it from her office window. Same car, same spot, same tinted windows that revealed nothing. On Wednesday, it returned. On Thursday, it was gone. In its place, someone had left a single white chrysanthemum at the building's main entrance. The same flower that had decorated the private dining room at the Sovereign. Someone was sending a message. Jun Seo doubled her security detail without explaining why. Destiny noticed anyway. The extra shadows following her movements. The new locks on her office door. The way Jun Seo's jaw tightened every time she mentioned leaving the building. Who are they? She asked him on Friday morning. The people Sungmin was working with. Jun Seo was standing at his window again, his favorite position when he didn't want to make eye contact. His name is Shin Taiwan, head of the Viper Syndicate, my father's oldest enemy. What does he want? Everything. Jun Seo's voice was flat, controlled. The ports, the routes, the infrastructure my grandfather built. Taiwan has been circling this organization for decades, waiting for weakness. And Sungmin gave him that weakness. Sungmin was supposed to deliver the Kang Empire on a silver platter. The bankruptcy wasn't about money. It was about transferring assets to shell companies Taiwan controls. By the time anyone noticed, it would have been too late. Destiny absorbed this information. So what happened to Sungmin wasn't really about him. It was about revenge. 20 years ago, my father made a deal with Taiwan. A partnership. They were supposed to divide the shipping routes evenly. Instead, my father took everything. Bankrupted Taiwan's original organization. Forced him to rebuild from nothing. Jun Seo finally turned. Taiwan has been waiting ever since. Patient, methodical. Building power in the shadows while my father grew complacent. And now your father is dead. And now Taiwan sees his opportunity. Destiny stood, crossed the room, stood beside him at the window. What do you want to do? I want to end this. Legitimately, legally. Build a case so strong that Taiwan spends the rest of his life in prison. But, Jun Seo's laugh was bitter, but the evidence Sungmin could provide is complicated. Taiwan has connections, police, prosecutors, politicians. Taking him down through official channels could take years, decades. And in that time, you're vulnerable. In that time, everyone around me is vulnerable. His eyes met hers, including you. Destiny felt the weight of his concern, the genuine fear beneath his controlled exterior. I'm not afraid of Shin Taiwan. You should be. He's not like Sung-min. He doesn't work through lawyers and contracts. He works through violence, through fear, through making examples of people who interfere with his plans. Then let him come. Destiny's voice was steady. I didn't survive this long by running from bullies. Junseo studied her face. Whatever he was looking for, he seemed to find it. You're remarkable, he said quietly. You know that? I'm stubborn. There's a difference. In my experience, the two often go together. The moment stretched between them, warm, electric, full of things neither of them was ready to say. I want you to stay at the estate, Junseo said finally, until we have a better handle on the threat. Your apartment isn't secure enough. I'm not leaving my apartment because some crime boss sent me a flower. It's not about the flower. It's about what comes after the flower. His expression hardened. Taewon is testing us, probing our defenses, seeing how we react. If he senses weakness, any weakness, he'll strike. And you think I'm a weakness? I think you're the most important person in this building. Junseo's voice dropped. And I can't lose you. The words slipped out. Both of them froze. Junseo's expression flickered. Surprise. Vulnerability. Something he hadn't meant to reveal. Destiny's heart stopped. Junseo. The estate has better security, he continued quickly, recovering his composure. Private grounds. Armed guards. Surveillance that covers every angle. It's the safest place in Seoul. And you'll be there? I'll be there. She should argue. She should insist on maintaining her independence. She should remind him that she wasn't some damsel who needed protecting. But the truth was, she was scared. Not of Shin Taiwan. Not of the threat. Of herself. Of what she felt when Junseo looked at her like that. Of how much she wanted to say yes. Not because of safety. Because of him. Fine, she heard herself say. But I'm bringing my own coffee maker. Your fancy stuff tastes like expensive disappointment. Junseo smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. I'll have someone collect your things. That night, Destiny moved into the Kang estate. The main house was a masterpiece of traditional Korean architecture meeting modern security. Curved rooflines and hand-painted beams surrounded by walls that could withstand military assault. Gardens with koi ponds and ancient pines. And guards. Everywhere guards. Her room was larger than her entire Seoul apartment. A king-sized bed with silk sheets. A bathroom with heated floors and a soaking tub. Windows overlooking a meditation garden that probably cost more to maintain than most houses cost to build. She couldn't sleep. At midnight, she gave up, pulled on a robe and wandered the grounds. The gardens were beautiful in moonlight, silver light on dark water, the soft splash of koi moving beneath the surface, the distant hum of Seoul's nightlife muffled by walls and distance and money. She found Junseo standing at the edge of the largest pond. His back was to her, his shoulders tense. His reflection rippled on the water below. You should be sleeping, he said without turning. So should you. Neither of them moved. Destiny walked closer, stood beside him, watched the fish move through water that looked like liquid midnight. My father built this pond, Junseo said finally. His voice was distant, lost in memory. He said koi represent perseverance, swimming upstream against impossible currents. Sounds like something a father would say. He believed it. He spent 40 years swimming upstream, building something from nothing, fighting enemies who wanted him dead, surviving betrayals that would have destroyed lesser men. And you? Junseo was quiet for a long moment. I've been swimming alone for a long time. Destiny! He turned to face her. Moonlight caught his features, shadows and silver and something painfully vulnerable. I don't want to swim alone anymore. Her breath caught. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that one small movement would close the gap between them entirely. I know this is complicated, he said quietly. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I can't stop thinking about you, about what you did in that restaurant, about who you are, about who you make me want to be. Junseo? Tell me to stop. His voice was rough, raw. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll never mention it again. I'll be your boss and nothing more. I'll bury this so deep it'll never see daylight. Destiny looked into his eyes. She thought about her grandmother, about her father, about every lesson she'd ever learned about protecting herself, about not getting involved, about staying invisible. She thought about everything she'd given up to be standing here, and she thought about everything she might lose if she walked away. I'm not going to tell you to stop, she whispered. Junseo's hand rose, touched her face, gentle, almost reverent. What are you going to tell me? Destiny leaned into his touch. I'm going to tell you that I'm terrified, that this is probably a mistake, that there are enemies circling and threats mounting, and 1,000 reasons why this can't work. And I don't care. She looked up at him. Because my grandmother taught me that the world is dark because people are afraid to turn on the lights. And you, Kang Junseo, are the brightest thing I've seen in years. He kissed her, soft at first, then deeper. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shirt. The moonlight wrapped around them like a blessing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Junseo rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he murmured. I know. There's no going back. I know. Destiny. Stop talking. She pulled him back down. We can figure out the consequences tomorrow. They stood in the garden for what felt like hours, talking, kissing, learning the geography of each other's hopes and fears. When they finally returned to the house, walking hand in hand through silent corridors, Destiny felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, terrifying, wonderful hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if they would survive the enemies closing in. She didn't know if love was possible in a world built on shadows and secrets. But she knew one thing. She wasn't invisible anymore. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. What Destiny didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that someone had been watching from the tree line, photographing everything. And by morning, those photographs would be in the hands of a man who had just found his perfect weapon. He's a Mafia boss worth billions. She's a waitress from DC, with student loans and a dream. Everything says this shouldn't work. But when he looks at her like that, like she's the first real thing he's touched in years, logic doesn't matter. What happens next will test everything they think they know about love and survival. Only subscribers will find out how this ends. The photographs arrived at breakfast. Destiny was reaching for her coffee when Junseo's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. What is it? He didn't answer, just stared at the phone like it had transformed into a snake. She stood, walked around the table, looked over his shoulder, and felt her stomach drop. Photos of them. In the garden. Last night. His hands in her hair. Her face turned up to his. The kiss that had felt like the beginning of everything. Captured from a distance. Professional quality. Time-stamped. Underneath the images, a message. The waitress is a liability. Remove her, or we will. Destiny's hands started to shake. Junseo's expression had transformed. The vulnerable man from last night was gone. In his place stood something harder, colder. The face of a king. They were on the grounds. His voice was ice. Inside the perimeter. past the guards and the surveillance and every security measure we have. How? It doesn't matter how. He was already moving, dialing numbers, barking orders in Korean too fast for her to follow. What matters is they're sending a message. They can reach us anywhere. They can see everything. And if we don't comply with their demands... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Within an hour, the estate was transformed. Armed guards at every entrance, security sweeping every room, K9 units checking the grounds for intruders or explosives. Junseo's most trusted people forming a protective bubble that extended 50 feet in every direction. And destiny was at the center of it all. The target, the liability, the thing that needed to be removed. I should leave. She found Junseo in his study, hunched over a desk covered with reports and photographs, and the accumulated evidence of his enemy's reach. If I'm not here, they have no leverage. If you leave, they win. Junseo didn't look up. This isn't about protecting the company. This is about breaking me. Taiwan knows that hurting you would destroy me more than losing the ports ever could. Because of last night? Because of who you are, what you represent. Finally, he raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, furious. You saved my empire. You saw through Sungmin's lies when no one else did. You chose courage when invisibility would have been easier. His voice cracked slightly. And then you chose me, even knowing what I am, even knowing the dangers. You chose me anyway. Junseo, Taiwan isn't just threatening to remove you because you're a witness. He's threatening to remove you because you're hope. Proof that good people can exist in this world. Proof that I might actually deserve something better than the darkness I was born into. Destiny crossed the room, knelt beside his chair, took his hands. Then let's fight back. Together. The way we've been doing since the night we met. I can't ask you to stay in danger. You're not asking. I'm telling. She squeezed his hands. I didn't survive Howard University on scholarship, work 3 jobs to pay my rent, and spend 14 months pouring tea for criminals just to run away the moment things get hard. A smile flickered across his face. Brief, sad, but real. You're impossible. I've been told. He pulled her up, wrapped his arms around her, held her like she might disappear. We'll find them, he said against her hair. Whoever got onto the grounds, whoever took those photographs. We'll track them down, and we'll make them tell us everything. And then we take the fight to Taiwan. Not with lawyers and courts, not with the old ways either, but with evidence, real evidence, the kind that brings down empires. Destiny pulled back, met his eyes. You have a plan. I have the beginning of one. Junseo released her, walked to his desk, pulled out a file folder. Sungmin has been cooperating, not because he's suddenly grown a conscience, because he's terrified. Taiwan has a reputation for eliminating loose ends. Sungmin knows he's next on the list. What has he given you? Names, dates, account numbers. Documentation of payoffs to police and prosecutors. Evidence of smuggling operations Taiwan thought were buried. Is it enough? By itself? No. Taiwan's lawyers could tie it up in courts for decades. Junseo's expression hardened. But combined with what you've been finding in our own records, the shell companies, the money transfers, the paper trail connecting Taiwan's operations to mine, he spread documents across the desk. We can prove that Taiwan didn't just try to steal my company. He tried to frame me for his own crimes. Every illegal shipment, every bribed official, every dirty dollar, he was planning to make it look like I was responsible. Destiny stared at the evidence. It was brilliant, terrible, the kind of scheme that took years to construct and seconds to destroy. He was going to take your empire and your freedom. He was going to take everything. And when I was locked away for crimes I didn't commit, he would have stepped in as the savior, the legitimate businessman cleaning up the Kang corruption, the hero who brought down a criminal dynasty. Except we stopped him, Except you stopped him. Junseo's eyes met hers. Everything flows from that moment in the restaurant. You saw what no one else could see. You spoke when everyone else stayed silent. You turned on the light. Destiny felt tears prick her eyes. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me finish what we started. Every piece of evidence, every connection, every thread that ties Taiwan to this conspiracy. He handed her a thick folder. Can you do that? She took the folder, flipped it open, and saw enough to bring down an empire. I can do that. They worked through the night. Dawn found them surrounded by coffee cups and legal pads and a map of corruption that stretched across 2 countries and 20 years. Destiny's eyes were burning, her hands were cramping, but her mind was sharp, focused. She was doing what she was born to do. I found it, she said as morning light streamed through the windows. The connection you were looking for. Junseo looked up from his own stack of documents. Show me. She spread a series of papers across the desk. Bank records, corporate filings, shipping manifests. 15 years ago, your father borrowed money from Taiwan to expand the Busan terminal. It was supposed to be a partnership, equal share of profits, shared control of operations. I know. He told me about it before he died. What he didn't tell you is what happened next. Destiny pointed to a date on one of the documents. 3 months after the expansion was complete, your father defaulted on the loan. Deliberately. He'd structured the agreement so that default triggered a buyout clause, but in his favor, not Taiwan's. Junseo's face went pale. He stole the terminal. He stole the terminal. The expansion. Everything Taiwan had invested. And he did it using the same manufactured insolvency technique that Sungmin tried to use on you. The irony hung in the air. The weapon that had almost destroyed Junseo was the same weapon his father had used to destroy Taiwan. My father wasn't the victim, Junseo whispered. He was the first betrayer. Destiny nodded slowly. And Taiwan has been waiting 20 years to return the favor. Junseo sat down heavily. His face was gray, the weight of his father's sins settling on his shoulders, like a physical burden. Everything I believed about my family, my empire, my inheritance. He looked at Destiny. Built on a lie my father told first. She crossed to him, knelt beside his chair, took his hands. Your father's sins aren't your sins. His choices aren't your choices. She squeezed his fingers. The man I see is trying to be better. That's worth more than any inheritance. Junseo closed his eyes. How can you still believe in me? After everything? Because belief isn't about perfection. Destiny's voice was steady. It's about potential. And you, Kang Junseo, have more potential than anyone I've ever met. He pulled her close, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled against his chest. But you're stuck with me anyway. They stayed like that as the sun rose. 2 people, 2 worlds, 2 histories full of pain and betrayal and broken promises. Finding something new in each other. Finding hope. But somewhere across the city, Shin Taiwan was receiving a report. The waitress wasn't leaving. The target was staying. And that meant it was time for a different approach. He picked up his phone, dialed a number. Plan B, he said simply. Make it clean. The call ended, and the countdown to destruction began. He was raised to trust no one. She was taught to see everyone's lies. Together, they might just save each other. But enemies are closing in, and the final battle will cost them everything. Don't miss the ending. Subscribe now. The explosion ripped through the parking garage at 7:43 a.m. Destiny was stepping out of the elevator when the blast wave hit. Heat and noise and pressure that slammed her against the concrete wall like a giant's fist. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. Someone was screaming. Maybe her. Then Junseo was there, appearing from nowhere, covering her body with his, shielding her from the secondary debris that rained down like deadly confetti. "Are you hurt?" His voice sounded distant through the ringing in her ears. "Destiny, are you hurt?" She did a mental inventory. Arms, legs, head. Everything seemed attached. Everything seemed functional. "I'm okay." Her voice shook. "I'm okay." Junseo pulled her to her feet. His face was cut. Blood ran down his cheek, but his eyes were clear, focused. The eyes of a man who had lived his entire life expecting violence. "That was my car," he said flatly. "The one we were supposed to take to the office." Destiny looked at the burning wreckage 20 feet away. The car she had been walking toward. The car they would have been inside if Junseo hadn't stopped to take a phone call. If they'd been 30 seconds earlier. 30 seconds. That was the margin between life and death. "Taiwan," she breathed. "Plan B." Junseo's jaw tightened. He couldn't scare us away, so he tried to eliminate us. Security was flooding the garage now, fire suppression systems activating. The wail of sirens in the distance, but Destiny barely noticed any of it. She was staring at the flames, thinking about how close they'd come. Thinking about what would have happened if Junseo had made it to the car first. Thinking about a world without him in it. "We have to end this." Her voice was stronger now, harder. "No more waiting. No more building cases. We need to take Taiwan down now. The evidence isn't complete. The evidence is good enough." She grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. "He just tried to kill us. In your own building. With your own security everywhere. If we don't move now, he'll try again. And again. Until he succeeds." Junseo studied her face. Whatever he saw there made his expression shift. "You're right." He pulled out his phone. "Chief Inspector Yoon, I have everything. We move today." The next 8 hours were a blur. Destiny worked faster than she'd ever worked in her life. Compiling evidence, organizing documents, building the case that would bring down an empire of shadows. Junseo made calls. Coordinated with law enforcement. Activated relationships his family had spent decades cultivating. By evening, they had enough. By night, the raids began. Destiny watched on the monitor in Junseo's office as simultaneous operations hit 6 locations across Seoul. Warehouses, offices, safe houses. The infrastructure of Taiwan's criminal network dismantled in a single coordinated strike. 6 screens. 6 teams. 6 doors splintering inward as law enforcement poured through. Junseo stood beside her. His hand found hers. Squeezed. "This is it," he said quietly. "No going back now. No going back." They watched together as 20 years of Taiwan's careful construction collapsed. Evidence seized, operatives arrested, bank accounts frozen. The paper trail they'd assembled leading investigators to deeper and deeper layers of corruption. By midnight, Shin Taiwan himself was in custody. Destiny saw it happen on screen 5, an older man in an expensive suit, face contorted with rage, being led away in handcuffs. He was shouting something. Threats, probably. Promises of revenge. But his words didn't matter anymore. His power was gone. Junseo turned off the screens. The office fell silent. Destiny suddenly realized she was exhausted. Bone deep, soul deep. The kind of tired that came from running on adrenaline for hours. "It's over," she said. The words felt surreal. "It's over." Junseo turned to face her. "Because of you. Because of us." "No." He stepped closer, cupped her face in his hands. "This started with you, in that restaurant, with 2 words that shouldn't have mattered, but changed everything." "Excuse me," Destiny murmured, remembering. "Excuse me." Junseo smiled, soft, genuine, full of wonder. The two bravest words anyone has ever spoken to me. He kissed her, not like the garden, not soft and questioning. This kiss was celebration, relief, to promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Junseo rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. Destiny's heart stopped. What? I know it's fast. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is crazy, but I almost lost you today. I almost lost everything that matters, and I realized something. What? I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. His eyes burned into hers. Life is short and fragile and unpredictable. I don't want to spend another day without you knowing exactly how I feel. Destiny's mind was spinning. This was insane. They'd known each other for a month. She was a waitress from D.C. He was a former Mafia boss worth billions. Nothing about this made sense. But when she looked into his eyes, sense didn't matter. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes. Junseo's face transformed, joy breaking through like sunrise. Yes? Yes. She laughed. The sound surprised her. Light. Free. Happy. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. He picked her up, spun her around, laughing like a child. When he set her down, tears were streaming down both their faces. I love you, he said. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened. But I love you, Destiny Okafor. More than I've ever loved anything. I love you too. She touched his face. The cut had stopped bleeding. He'd have a scar. A reminder of this day. I love you too. They stood in the silent office, surrounded by screens that had just broadcast the end of an empire. Two people who had found each other across impossible distances. Two people who had chosen light when darkness was easier. Two people who had turned on the light. Her grandmother would have approved. Do you believe people can change? Really change? Junseo was raised in a criminal empire, taught to trust no one, built to be cold. But look at him now. Look at what love can do. Comment your answer. I'm reading every single one. 1 year later, the private dining room at the Sovereign looked exactly the same. Same illegal temple wood panels, same silk tablecloths, same chrysanthemum arrangements worth more than most monthly salaries, same crystal decanters fracturing candlelight into rainbows, but everything was different. Destiny sat at the head of the table, wearing a dress that cost more than her old apartment's annual rent. A diamond ring caught the light every time she moved her hand. Beside her, a 3-year-old girl with bright eyes and curious fingers was systematically destroying a very expensive silk napkin. They'd adopted Mina 6 months ago, an orphan from Busan whose mother had died in one of Taiwan's smuggling operations. Junseo had found her file while reviewing evidence for the prosecution. He'd shown it to Destiny without a word. They'd started the paperwork the next day. Now Mina sat between them, babbling in a mixture of Korean and English, completely unaware that she was having dinner in the exact spot where her new parents' lives had collided. Junseo emerged from the private entrance. Same room, same table, different man. The haunted look was gone from his eyes. The weight had lifted from his shoulders. He smiled now, laughed easily, moved through the world like someone who had finally stopped swimming against the current. Sorry I'm late. He kissed Destiny's forehead, then scooped Mina into his arms. The press conference ran long. How did it go? Better than expected. The legitimization program is officially complete. Every Kang Holdings operation is now fully legal, fully transparent, and fully boring. He grinned. My grandfather would be furious. Your grandfather would have adapted. Destiny smiled. That's what Kangs do. That's what Kangs do, Junseo agreed. He settled into his chair, Mina on his lap. The Minister of Trade actually thanked me. Said our cooperation with the investigation helped dismantle smuggling networks across 4 countries. You're a hero. We're heroes." He reached across the table, took her hand. "None of this happens without you." Destiny looked around the room. 1 year ago, she'd walked through that door as a waitress, invisible, unknown, carrying a tray of tea that would change everything. Now she was chief compliance officer of Kang Holdings, wife to a reformed billionaire, mother to a little girl who would never know the darkness her parents had fought through. Her student loans were paid. Her FBI application was withdrawn. Her dreams had evolved into something she'd never imagined. Not because she'd given up, because she'd found something better. "I want to make a toast," Junseo said, raising his glass. Mina mimicked him with her sippy cup. Destiny laughed. "To second chances," Junseo said. "To impossible odds. To waitresses who speak up and documents that scatter and 2 words that saved an empire." "To flashlights in the darkness," Destiny added. "To flashlights in the darkness." Junseo's eyes held hers. "And to the woman who taught me that turning on the light is always worth the risk." They drank. Mina slurped enthusiastically. The candles flickered. And somewhere in the room, in the exact spot where Destiny had scattered those papers, a new arrangement of chrysanthemums caught the light. The same flowers. Different meaning. Not betrayal anymore. Hope. After dinner, they walked through the restaurant's garden. Junseo carried a sleeping Mina against his shoulder. Destiny's arm was looped through his. "I keep thinking about that night," she said quietly. "What would have happened if I'd stayed silent?" "You wouldn't have." "How do you know?" "Because I know you." Junseo looked at her. "Destiny Okafor doesn't do silent. She doesn't do invisible. She doesn't do safe." He smiled. "She does brave. She does right. She does whatever it takes." "I was terrified." "I know. You told me. The first night, in that very room." His voice softened. "You said you do some of your best work scared." "I did say that. It's still true." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "You could have had an easier life. A safer life. A life without enemies and threats, and a husband who comes with more baggage than an airline." "I didn't want easier." Destiny touched his face. The scar from the car bomb had faded, but was still visible, a permanent reminder of what they'd survived. "I wanted you. Why?" The question wasn't insecure. It was genuine. Even now, after everything, part of Junseo still wondered what he'd done to deserve her. "Because my grandmother taught me that the world is dark, because people decide it's someone else's job to turn on the lights." Destiny smiled. "And you, Kang Junseo, were the biggest, brightest light I'd ever seen. Even when you didn't know it. Even when you thought you were drowning. Even when you couldn't see anything but shadows." She kissed him softly. "I saw the light in you. And I decided it was my job to help you see it too." Junseo's arms tightened around her and Mina both. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you, and I love our daughter. And I love the life we're building together. I love you too." They stood in the garden as the Seoul skyline glittered behind them. A former Mafia boss turned legitimate businessman. A former waitress turned compliance officer. And a little girl who would grow up knowing that courage and compassion can change the world. The Kang legacy continued, but now it was built on light, from a drowning man to a loving husband, from an invisible waitress to a woman who changed an empire. This is what happens when one person refuses to stay silent. If this story moved you, if you felt something, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications, because next week we have another story, another impossible love, another moment where everything changes. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, someone who's been invisible for too long, someone who's afraid to speak up. Tell them what Destiny learned. The world is dark because too many people decide it's someone else's job to turn on the lights. Be the light, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.